Today we'll take an example of a typical diagnosis in medicine like rheumatic, mitral stenosis, and see how we can understand the patient based on the pathogenesis of the disease. If you understand that rheumatic means that there is a streptococcal infection in the throat which is of the cardiogenic strains, it has an antigen against which an antibody is formed, immune complexes are there, and these immune complexes deposits in joints and in the endocardium of the heart. In this particular case, it is the mitral valve endocardium. So it licks the joints but bites the heart. That means this goes away, the arthralgia goes away, but there is. So this will present with sore throat, and fever. Then there may be evidence of some sort of inflammation or toxicity. It licks the joint and then it bites the heart. Initially, the mitral valve will become edematous, and thus there will be narrowing, and the murmur that is produced in the acute mitral valve involvement disappears later is known as Carey-Coombs murmur. Later on, this will fibrose and the stenosis will become permanent. Normally, 8 square centimeter is the opening of the mitral valve. If it decreases to less than 3, then a murmur would be produced, and if it decreases less than 2.5, then probably the hydrodynamic effects of the stenosis would be produced. So now let us draw the heart. This is the left atrium. This is the left ventricle. So here is the tricuspid valve, and it is getting its feed from the inferior and the superior vena cava, the atrium. Here is the pulmonary artery. Going to the lungs. And the pulmonary vein returning from the lungs, which is feeding the left atrium, and here you have the mitral valve, and here you have the left ventricle, and this left ventricle is going out as the arterial supply to the body. The superior vena cava is linked to the neck veins, the jugular vein. So here you have the jugular veins, and the inferior vena cava, into the inferior vena cava drains the liver, through the portal vein the spleen, and here is the fluid in the abdomen, and finally you have veins which come to the inferior vena cava which drain the lower limbs. So now, if this mitral valve is narrow, then there is obstruction of the blood from flowing from the left atrium to the ventricle. So consequently, there will be two types of failure: a forward failure and a backward failure or back pressure. So the pulse volume may decrease. This may decrease, and it may decrease so much that sometimes you may have ambulatory hypotension. For example, if a person gets up, he may fall unconscious, or there may be even syncope or cerebral or brain blood supply deficiency. Now you start considering the backward failure. So the first site to be affected will be the left atrium. The left atrium may enlarge. As there is stasis in the left atrium, there can be ball valve thrombus, and if the thrombus gets into the narrowed wall, there can be sudden death. And an enlarged left atrium may press the esophagus, leading to dysphagia, or may fibrillate, because a very large atrium is not governed by the sinoatrial node. So when it fibrillates, there is tachycardia, and there is irregular pulse, and this may need defibrillation by drug or what is called as radio frequency ablation. Then from the atrium, which can cause thrombosis, sudden death, dysphagia, fibrillation, we move to the pulmonary vessels and we find that there is congestion of the pulmonary veins. So there is congestion of the pulmonary veins, and this may leak fluid in the lung, which may lead to crepitus. And if there is too much of fluid filling the lung, there is orthopnea. That means as the person lies down, there is breathlessness. Then in the sputum, there is leakage of blood into the lung alveoli, and this blood in the alveoli can present as heart failure cells. The macrophages will absorb red blood cells, become brown, and they are called as heart failure cells. or they may present as hemoptysis. So this is the pulmonary phase of the problem, and what happens that to protect this increased pressure in the capillary system of the lung, the pulmonary artery would collapse, and as it collapses there will be pulmonary hypertension, back pressure on the pulmonary artery. So this greater back pressure would first of all make these pulmonary walls close with a greater sound, and this is called as P2 accentuation. The second heart sound caused by the pulmonary waves, pulmonary valves shutting down, is accentuated. Then the right ventricle will hypertrophy. This will present as parasternal heave. Then this right ventricle will fail. And as right ventricle fails, you would be able to see neck veins because of the superior vena cava and the jugular veins draining into it. In the inferior vena cava system, you will see hepatomegaly, congested tender liver, splenomegaly, ascites, and pedal edema. So neck veins increased, tender hepatomegaly, splenomegaly, ascites, pedal edema are the 5 signs of right ventricular failure. Now, there is a complication, and that complication is that there can be bacterial deposits on this valve, and this is called as subacute bacterial endocarditis. And this has 4 features. The first is clubbing of nails. The second is tender splenomegaly with splenic rub. The third is petechial hemorrhages, which you can see in the retina or the conjunctiva. And the fourth is microscopic hematuria. So, if you are making a diagnosis of rheumatic mitral stenosis, then it is your duty to look for everything that can happen in this pathogenesis. And your diagnosis and history taking and examination should show that you have looked for them. The only thing that you have to additionally understand is what is the murmur of mitral stenosis and why is it that way. So, we have drawn our small heart here. And in this small heart, through the superior vena cava, we placed a catheter which is measuring pressure. And this is the timeline. So the first, as the atrium contracts and pushes blood here, you find the pressure would rise. So this is atrial systole. then the impulse would travel through the interventricular septum and the ventricle will start contracting. Now both right and left side are undergoing the same cycle. As the ventricle starts contracting, the pressure starts rising again. And as the pressure in the ventricle exceeds the pressure in the atrium, as it exceeds here, the mitral and the tricuspid valves, we are drawing two lines to show them, will close. So this is mitral tricuspid closing, which is the first heart sound. Now the pressure is in the ventricle is more than the atrium but less than the artery, pulmonary artery or aorta. Therefore, the pulmonary valves are already closed. So from here to here, the pressure would continue to rise with both inlet and outlet valves closed, and therefore the volume of the ventricle is constant, and this is therefore called as isovolumic phase. Then the ventricle pressure exceeds that of the exit artery and the blood exits, and this is defined by opening of the pulmonary valves. So here we hear what is called as ejection click. Ventricle continues to contract, pressure rises, and then the ventricle stops contracting and the pressure starts falling again. First, it becomes lesser than the arterial or exit pressure. So pressure here has become lesser than the arterial pressure, and therefore the pulmonary valve and the aortic valves would close. So pulmonary aortic closure, and this is the second heart sound. Again, the pressure is less than the artery but more in the atrium, therefore tricuspid valve is also closed and ejection valves are also closed, and therefore this phase of diastole would be known as isovolumic diastole. Now the pressure becomes lesser than the atrium, and because of the locking of these valves, they need chordae, tendineae and papillary muscles to open because of the locking of the valves. Therefore, the pressure in the ventricle falls far less than the pressure of the atrium. So when the tricuspid and mitral valves open, then the ventricle sucks blood from the atrium. This is known as rapid inflow phase. Then the rest of the diastole continues, and you will have another atrial systole here. So now, if the mitral valve is stenosed, whenever blood passes through it, it will create a sound. It will create a murmur. So when is blood passing through the mitral and tricuspid valve? One, during the rapid inflow phase, and secondly during the atrial systole. And here you will have the first heart sound and the other cycle. So there will be a sound here and there will be a sound here. This because of the rapid inflow phase and this because of the atrial systole, and this is somewhere between the second and the first heart sound, therefore this is known as mid-diastolic, and this is just before the systole, therefore it is known as pre-systolic. So mid-diastolic pre-systolic murmur is the characteristic of mitral stenosis. Now the other thing is that since the pressure in the left atrium is much higher because of the back pressure, then the ventricle will be able to exceed the atrial pressure at a much later stage when the ventricle is contracting much faster. So instead of shutting the mitral valve, it will bang the mitral valve shut, and this is called as accentuated fast heart sound. So this is the third feature. And the fourth feature is that it also opens loudly. Therefore, here you have the opening of the mitral and tricuspid valve, and therefore there will be a opening snap here as the mitral and tricuspid valves close. So this murmur would be both in tricuspid stenosis and mitral stenosis. Supposing the mitral valve instead of stenosis regurgitates, therefore the blood will keep on flowing back through the mitral valve throughout this phase, right up to the end of the diastole. And therefore, if this is the murmur of mitral stenosis, the mitral regurgitation murmur will be pan-systolic. The third feature is that supposing the aortic valve is stenosed, then the murmur will appear only in this region. This is called as ejection systolic, after the ejection phase. So this is the ejection systolic murmur. And if the aortic valve is regurgitating, then the murmur will be heard here after the second heart sound, because this valve has failed to close fully, and therefore this will be called as early diastolic murmur, and this is for aortic regurgitation, and this is for aortic stenosis. So the murmurs can be aortic stenosis, aortic regurgitation, pulmonary stenosis, pulmonary regurgitation, mitral stenosis, mitral regurgitation, and the area in which they are heard. For example, a mitral stenosis murmur is a mid-diastolic pre-systolic murmur with accentuated first heart sound and presence of opening snap. It is heard best by the bell of the stethoscope at the apex of the heart. If there is a regurgitation murmur, there is a pansystolic murmur at the same place, which is radiating towards the axilla. And of course, right-sided murmurs are best heard in the parasternal region. The aortic stenosis murmur starts, you can hear it in the aortic area, and it is going towards the carotid vessels. So the site where the murmur is best heard and in which direction it is going is important. Now, once you know this basic pathophysiology of mitral stenosis, you would be able to make a diagnosis like rheumatoid, rheumatic mitral stenosis with atrial fibrillation, with orthopnea or pulmonary edema or hemoptysis, with pulmonary hypertension, with right ventricular hypertrophy or failure, plus minus with or without SAVE. Now this forms the complete diagnosis, clinical diagnosis of a case of mitral stenosis. If you stop here, you are in a problem. And if you stop in the whole, that means you understand the total pathogenesis of mitral stenosis. So this is how, for the first time that you hear about a condition or a diagnosis, you must understand the pathogenesis and you must be able to give a complete diagnosis. Thank you.